Haidong. In this video, we're going to talk about middle level master concept number 2. Now, these concepts don't necessarily go one on top of the other, although I do recommend it generally, right? So the idea I want to play with this time, so again, last time we really talked about, again, making sure the prep is in a good position. So let's talk about prep, right? So what almost all of us as Gumdoso learned is the whole idea of tip to tailbone. Now, again, the way I've, for a long time, have always taught it is that it's a prototype for, completely new people, right? So if I tell people, oh, just like give me an overhead swing, I see sometimes like this, or they do this kind of thing, like it's overhead swing. It's like, no, like overhead. It's like, like, okay, let's straighten it out a little bit. It's like, okay. So like if they're completely brand new, it's like, all right, tip to tailbone and cut. Tip to tailbone and cut. So the way that, again, for the longest time, I've always taught it has been, it's a prototype for new people to learn the basic mechanics of cutting just straight down the middle. Because it's a very visceral reaction, right? Now obviously don't go too far tip to tailbone because you'll stab yourself in the spine and bad, right? But if you're here and you have tip to tailbone, that does give you the idea of like, okay, I feel like I'm straight, and if I cut, I seem to cut straight. So, okay. Now, what are some drawbacks for that, right? So again, I've talked about this in a few other videos, but we're kind of talking about this in the future. So, one major issue is that noticing the preparation. Okay, I just talked about this, right? So if I'm all the way back here, I'm clearly not going to be able to cut effectively here, right? You can do it, but for most people, they just kind of the left hand kind of like traces the outline of their body here, right? Right? And also notice, if I really emphasize it, my head almost does a snap, does like a snapping motion to compensate because the right arm is dominating. When you have this right leg, tip to tailbone, the right hand usually dominates. Right? I say usually because we're going to change it. Right? So if you're here, because the left hand is completely deactivated. There's nothing I can do with the left hand. I also have really good wrist flexibility. Even then, it's not going to be that powerful. So yes, this is a really good prototype for newbies, but this is mid-level. So like, okay, what's up? Like, what's changing? So keep in mind how we usually learn this. We usually learn this in our kimase, right? So if we're in our kimase, right, so don't judge. So if we're in a kimase, if we're here, tip to tailbone, okay, not great, right? Like here, same issue as we talked about before. Okay, well, when I talked about the overhead thing, I mentioned the elbows, right? So a major no-no. So this should not be happening for anyone who's been training, has been training for more than a year. It's going to happen anyway, but for if you've been training for more than a year, this should not be happening. The elbow flare, right? This is not good. Why? It's inefficient because you have to bring it back online to cut. So you're wasting energy. You're wasting equal and opposite energy, so it's not even contributing to the cut. You're here, and this inward motion is counteracted with this inward motion. They're not helping you actually cut forward. So again, if you're watching this video and you're mid-level, you've been training for a couple of years, it's not good. So let's change it up a little bit, right? So if we're, again, tip to tailbone, okay. I don't want to flare out. Okay, keep the elbows tucked in. That feels weird. So this is what's going to happen. It's going to be easier to see from the side. So if I'm here, so again, this is bad. Better. What's really going to happen is think about the core here, almost like someone's going to punch right behind your sternum, and it's going to have that flex this way. So if I actually keep the power of my left hand, again, I don't want it to deactivate like this. If I have that power in my left hand, right, if I'm here, I'm going to pull it back. So notice how much my lower back is going to stretch, and my left hand is so powerful, it's as far back as I can go, and bang, bang, bang. Does that make sense? So notice, as I'm here, as I'm flexing my lower back, it is going to naturally throw itself into this position and cut forward. Does that make sense? So I asked that as if you can respond. So that is a major, major difference between when a white belt's doing this, because all you want them to do as a white belt when they're learning this is to be straight, right? This is for us masters who've been training for a while. We're going to generate a lot more power, right? This cut should be able to destroy stuff, right? So for here, again, not a good example, where you kind of flex in and cut, versus again, pulling back, keeping the elbows nice and close, pull back and throw forward, like so. Make sense? So notice we've mostly been doing center cuts, right? We're going to be able to do the same thing with our diagonals, right? So instead of tip the tailbone and again keeping the elbows nice and close to really throw forward, think about going on a dime cut like this, right? So if we're here, flex. You see, again, almost like the seam in my uniform, flexing this way, right? Flex and cut. Flex and cut. So these should be nice and powerful motions. You should be able to bifurcate into an enemy as opposed to merely tapping or slicing. This should be a very powerful slashing motion that should do quite a lot of damage. This is also going to be really good for when you do bamboo cutting, with the exception that when you're doing bamboo cutting, you're going to be using your back knee and your sotose to kind of help compensate for the equal and opposite motion. So hopefully that's making sense. So again, noticing there's a difference between the same concept between a lower level and a mid-level practitioner. Now, what we can probably eventually think about is like high-level stuff. I don't necessarily qualify myself that highly yet. I'm kind of like putting myself in the mid-level. But that's the idea, right? So really take these ideas and, again, bifurcate the difference between a teaching mechanism and something that you yourself can really use to have a lot more power in your cut. So I guess with that, make sure you keep training, stay safe, and stay humble. Haidong!